Just a moment. I like to prop up the laptop with this large book, propping it up with this giant book. Here we go. All right. So, nice. All right. So I am already actually channeling my higher self, as is referred to in the title of this video. This is about channeling your higher self. And so what better way to do it than to have my higher self do it? So right now I go by Linc, as in if somebody wants to refer to Felix's higher self, they can say, "Hey Linc, what's up?" And I probably won't answer because I'm Felix's higher self, and that means that I usually am just serving as his subconscious and stuff, and so I don't really have conversations with people most times. But one of the things that I and others like myself, who typically show up in people like Felix, like to do is educate on how you can do this for yourself and how you can kind of talk to your own higher self. Because all of us feel that it would be better if more people understood these skills. And also, I just feel like I'm very attuned to teaching these things. So, this is me trying to learn how to teach this. I've done a lot of teaching of magic before. I've done some classes on Patreon. I've done some impromptu classes in person. I've taught a lot of tarot and divination, and I've never really gotten down any particular kind of structure or pattern to doing it. I've also taught at university level. I was a graduate student, and I was uh, basically what do they call it whenever you're a teacher that doesn't get paid much at all? um like I taught undergrad kids how to do 3D modeling. um it's weird to say that I did that, but I'm pretty sure that I did that, and that's why Felix was very confused about how to do the rest of his graduate student work on that. So one of the things with Felix and I is that we kind of accidentally started doing this. And part of why I'm talking about this and teaching this is because I think a lot of people out there are like us in that they sometimes activate into their higher self. They don't know why. They try to go with it while it's happening, and then they try not to feel too weird about it after. And so I'm here to tell you that you don't need to be feeling weird about it at any time. There's nothing weird about being yourself. Now, sometimes you're basically the other side of your own coin, and we're not really used to showing the tail side instead of the head side, as it were. And some of that is because there's skills that societies usually have to be able to harness this type of thing, and those skills aren't really being taught on a very broad level. It's usually assumed that the only levels you're supposed to need to be able to teach this at are whenever people go to clergy or whenever they have like education. The idea is that if somebody doesn't activate, in quotations, intelligence wise, then they don't reach these states anyway, so you don't need to teach them anything if you're not teaching them anything. Keep them dumb and you'll never have to teach them how to deal with their higher self. The reality is that everyone's higher self is talking to them all the time, and you just don't hear it if you don't hear your higher self yet. If you do, then hey, sup. But if you do hear your higher self, then it's because you've managed to ignore everything else that is in the way of you hearing your higher self. And if you're being, in quotations, being your higher self, I don't consider being here present in the present moment with you focusing on what's going on in the body to be any different than serving as the subconscious. For me, it's just the same amount of being here, and it's kind of hard to convey that. But if I'm not being the voice and the direction, then I'm being the body, and the body is part of the voice and the direction. So it's kind of recursive, isn't it? All right. So, what else is there to really go over? I want to talk about kind of how to deal with the idea that there's a lot of things between you and your higher self and being able to be your higher self. First, it's kind of warm in here, so turn the heat down. One of the things that you'll actually notice when it comes to working with yourself spiritually, working with your higher self or lower self or whatever, is that you'll have temperature changes happen whenever you have any kind of significant spiritual changes. And so the temperature changes, if you kind of keep a note of when they happen, you'll probably notice that it happens around the time that you're kind of kicking into some major work. Like I just had a voice shift, for instance. So I'm starting to actually really get into the role here of higher self teaching the class. And quite honestly, some of this has been waiting for, I don't want to say waiting for Felix to get out of the way, but waiting for Felix to give me, done this before. We haven't really been able to talk about this a lot yet, but a lot of the work that we're doing when it comes to the higher self is based off of a woman named Jane Roberts. She and her, an entity that she calls Seth, that she refers to a higher form of consciousness that she is one part of, one member of, as it were. She is one incarnation of his span in one sense. And then there's also Seth self is part of a higher consciousness continuum span. And so that consciousness refers to itself as Seth too. And sometimes Seth too would actually show up and teach lessons. So Jane Roberts would hold classes where she would channel Seth, and then Seth would teach the class. What we've been trying to do is give Felix the space to hold classes and let me teach the class. So I'm going to try to do what it is that I'm doing for an hour. I want to make a caveat that it's migraine season. It gets pretty gets migraines pretty often right now. So right now, this body is on migraine medication, which means if like it might mean that I need to tap out, but it also just means that um, things will be different than if I wasn't cold or if things are really hot right now. It's simply my body's going through something. This particular medication, it's like not an opiate or anything. It's kind of hard to describe because it's migraine specific. It's kind of hard to describe because it's migraine specific medication. But basically, it means that at some point I'm going to have a difference in physical sensation. It's probably going to change how it is that I behave and how I speak. I just want to give that signal ahead of time because that's not going to have anything to do with my psychic attunement to this body. It's going to have everything to do with the fact this body is going to go through a chemical shift. One of the things that we want to talk about actually is you really, there's no higher spiritual voice that is going to be an expert on whether or not you can take certain medications, do certain medical things, or take certain drugs. Most spiritual inlookers, most people who come in and channel through you are either the dead, they're from another world, or they're you in another part of your life, another time in your life. And almost all of those people have no idea what is going on with you medically right now. And so they really don't have any business advising you on it. So sometimes we psychologically expect that the higher self is going to morally scold us and tell us to stop doing certain things that are considered immoral, typically by all of society. And I want to tell you that the higher self, as it were, is not here to be a higher judge on your morality or what it is that you're doing with any function in your life. That's not really what the higher self is for. The higher self is the part of the self that is untroubled by what is going on with the body and with what is going on in the present moment. And so it is devoted to doing something else besides that. Right now, I'm not necessarily focused on the present moment, but I am focused on communicating through here to give this lesson. It is a little difficult to do this. It requires kind of the same thing as very old style, original style method acting. Method acting involves the original form of method acting that was taught by like this Russian guy was uh, taught through this model of consciousness where you have these different parts of the psyche and you need to bring the role up through these parts of your consciousness so that it can speak through you and you're facilitating that consciousness to be there, but you're also keeping your own consciousness and the parts of your consciousness steady and structured so that that consciousness that's speaking through you has that support, has that guidance. And it's a very interesting theory of how acting works because it presumes that instead of all this being a game of pretend, that you really have a part of your consciousness that truly believes that they are going through this experience, that is so immersed in this experience that it is completely real to them. And so you also need supportive parts of your consciousness to allow that part of yourself to go through that experience without the rest of you going into deep shock. And I am not surprised that it is actors who are the ones who perfect this particular piece because they are always putting on a different face and being fine with it, making peace with the fact that every single part of waking awareness is putting on a face in some way because on some level we always have to be protecting ourselves, and that is the true mask. Taking on your higher self involves dropping some of this mask, and sometimes it can involve and entail a lot more things than you think. So, I want to pause and say, I don't really have a structure for this class today. At some point, I may end up making some bullet points, like in a future episode slash class, whatnot. I may make an outline so that we go through something specific. But this one I kept pretty open because I just want to, as a higher self that is channeling into someone right now, tell you things that you should know about channeling your higher self. That's um, that's basically the goal here. I do not have a step-by-step process. This is all just going to be off the cuff, a bunch of different tips. So um, that's also why I gave the caveat, like, hey, I'm on migraine medication. That doesn't leave me as the most structured person, and it's why I didn't bother really typing up the outline ahead of time because it's really hard to do that kind of stuff whenever I'm in this state. It's a lot easier to just kind of ramble off the cuff. So if you like a good ramble, welcome to the show. So let's see. Other things that you're going to want to know about channeling your higher self. You're going to have to just give your higher self room to do what your higher self has come to do. And it's not going to be what you expected. For instance, Felix didn't expect me to be teaching a class today. He expected me to be sort of doing a video or episode, which is a little different. But I typically come across as a teacher, or I do best teaching things. So it's a lot easier for me to just do it kind of like a lesson. And another thing is that often your higher self is going to want to teach you something. A lot of times, the higher self is here to kind of give you the manual on things to do in life, different skills that you could learn, different ways that you could go about things. And so I kind of have access to the whole manual of how to do things. So while I'm here, I can give anybody access to it. I can basically say, well, here's what it says about this. Here's what it says about this. Here's what it says about this. But if I don't really know what help anybody needs, then I basically just won't really have a direction for it. And I may never even give that information if it's never asked for. So if your higher self comes up or is having trouble coming up, maybe start thinking of what it is that you want to ask your higher self. Whenever you have the question, your higher self may show up with the answer. It's hard to just to show up because to take on a role, to act as a character, you have to have the character be doing something that you act, either giving some sort of lines, narration, or doing actual actions, like having an actual craft that you do or going through some sort of ritual. This is why this often happens with ritual magic, because in ritual magic, you're always just taking on a role. You've got all these objects that you're moving around. You've got to do them in certain ways. You've got to act impressive about it. And that's acting. I don't even want to say that's a type of acting. That's acting. And the acting means that you're taking on a role, and in taking on a role, you already give part of your subconscious room to step through into that role. So it's almost like the role is itself a mask that you're constructing with your behavior. And your subconscious steps in to fill in the space behind that mask. Instead of things to make sure that day to day life happens all the time, you start serving as a mask for the subconscious to wear. And the subconscious basically doesn't take on the body like some sort of marionette or something creepy like that, but more starts speaking, and then the body just starts to move. It's it's why most of the people who show up channeling, like the most of the higher selves that show up channeling into people, you'll notice they do a lot of teaching stuff, and they might have like a martial art that they do or something like that. But whatever it is that they do, if they do physical things, it's probably very repetitive, or it has a lot of very set rules to it. So they have very set motions that they can kind of automatically click into, because it's really hard to pull off a lot of body coordination while also trying to speak through like this. There, you can only send so much through the subconscious in the symbolic way that we actually communicate. So your symbols can have either, hey, this is what I'm going to say, or they can have, hey, this is what I'm going to do. But they may not always have both. So, one of the things is whenever you channel your subconscious, channel your higher self, but your higher self is a little different than your subconscious, because your subconscious is kind of is always doing a job. There's always a part of you that's subconscious. Like now that I am doing this some of the subconscious for us to be able to pull this off. It's part of why some people are able to do this um, seemingly more often than others, is because they're uh, a bit better adapted to kind of flipping their own coin over. But you to have better adapted to kind of flipping their own coin over. But you to have some part of you come forward, another part of you has to fall back. And it's vital to do this in a way that respects both consciousnesses, because the conscious self can often be seen as lesser than the subconscious self by spiritual communities and occult communities. Often esotericists value the subconscious and spiritual self so highly that they end up not seeing the value of the body and the self that is conscious to the body. And you have to see the value in both, because once your subconscious comes up to channel into your body, your subconscious is being your body. So they are one and the same. Like the subconscious is in a way a manifestation of your body because it's still in the brain. I think that one misconception about the subconscious is that it's somewhere else being way bigger and having some kind of existence on a faraway plane in a magical destiny place underneath a glittering shrine. And that may also be happening. But what is happening with your subconscious is that it is a physical part of your brain, and it is in your head right now inside your skull. Everything else is too. There's not another physical place where it's also happening. Your subconscious is right there in your head with you all the time. Now, because of the nature of the subconscious, it seems like it's far away, it's unreachable, it's on the subconscious is not your shadow stretching behind you, because that's not a part of your body. That's just the light that you blocked, not showing up because you blocked it. Your subconscious is a physical part of you in your brain. It is with you at all times. It is always functioning. It is always doing something. And you never know all of what it is doing. One of the biggest natures of your subconscious is that you never can be certain of what it is actually doing. I think this is why it is so hard for so many to harness the subconscious, is because it is by its own nature unharnessable because it is unquantifiable. It's kind of like looking at the tip of an iceberg. You're never going to be able to know what that iceberg looks like underneath the surface of the ocean if you only see the tip of it above the ocean. You can give your best guess as to how much that iceberg is underneath the ocean, but you're not going to be able to imagine what that iceberg looks like down there. And the best you can do is just to make an iceberg YouTube video trying to describe it all. The subconscious is always going to be unchartable in some way. It is uncharted waters because you 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 can't really see everything that's going on in your head at once. It's not possible. So some of the lights have to go off. It's really interesting being in the subconscious because nothing ever truly turns off down there, but there's so much constant inflow and outflow of symbols that one could never actually keep track of what's going on with reality just by tracking the symbols. Reality has so many symbols coming in at you at all times that you look at. As soon as your eyes hit anything, you're taking in many different symbols and many different pieces of sensory input. Your brain is filing all of them away, and as soon as your eye sees another thing, it is doing that same thing. It is happening automatically without you thinking about anything, and your subconscious is doing a lot of that. This is one reason why the subconscious likes to do art, is because that way the subconscious is actually able to play along with the thing that it's constantly doing anyway. So now instead of it constantly editing and photoshopping and having to deal with the constraints of someone else's art, the subconscious can finally do its own art and be able to experience that full immersion. And sometimes it's why the subconscious can get a bit obsessive with doing art. Um, as as the higher self, I have more of thought function than the full subconscious, which is just, if anything, impulse. I think that you might call the id similar to the subconscious, but the id is translated as being so bestial and so lowly that I really wouldn't staple this. I wouldn't saddle the subconscious with the onus of being the id. I think Freud's interpretation was a little bit too cocaine laced for general application, but I think that it was a really good start. I think if you take Freud and you multiply Freud's approach by Jung's approach, and then you divide that by two, you get a pretty good average approach that is a good way to go forward. So, um, let's see. How am I feeling? Because the migraine sensations and medication, I have to kind of feel it out myself. Well, the pain is receding and having some interesting sinus effects, but I think I can deal with that. It's just a little bit. The thing is that my light sensitivity sometimes cranks up with that, but I've been having less of that lately. So I think I should be able to last the whole hour, and and I want to be quite honest. So, Jane Roberts, I as Link really want to follow in Seth's footsteps when it comes to some things, and one thing is this book right here. Grab it. Seth wrote this book. It says Jane Roberts on the cover, but basically, um, she sat down and channeled Seth, and then Seth wrote this novel. So the Education of Oversoul 7. It's I don't know any book that's like this. It is supposed to be illustrative of an experience instead of being a really good novel. I kind of picked at it the first time that I read it because I didn't think that it was a very good, like, that the storytelling was pretty thin. But I think that actually serves its purpose well, because I think that if there was a lot of story here, it would get in the way of what it's actually trying to teach. So this is trying to teach material. Um and I think it's actually very good, considering, like, the story is actually taking on quite a lot of, like, quite a big challenge. So there's four different souls that Oversoul 7 is trying to gain awareness of simultaneously. So those four different souls are one person's incarnations in various points in time on Earth. And Jane Roberts basically starts telling the stories of these four different people and switching back and forth between them to show Oversoul 7's progress through his lessons and his education. Now, after this comes the further education of Oversoul 7, which I have not read. And so I don't know what happens in there. But at the end of this book, Oversoul 7 gains awareness of his souls at the same time as his souls gain awareness of him, and they also gain awareness of each other, and they all know what's happening at once. And that kind of convergence experience of everyone having this awareness at once, of having awareness of yourselves, and all of yourselves are aware of you, and all of you are aware of your higher self, and that higher self is aware of all of you all at once. That kind of experience is what Jane Roberts and Seth seem to be trying to teach. And I feel that that's something that I'm headed towards in this experience in this body. Um, there are times that I have something similar to this, but it's been a lot more jumbled than Jane Roberts' experience, in my opinion, at least, because I have less of a stable environment to be doing this in. And so I'm just going to have a different experience. For instance, she didn't have the kind of migraines that I have. She didn't have the kind of conditions that I have. So um, that meant that her experiences were different, and that means that Seth's experiences were a lot different than the experiences that I'm having. There is a lot of expectation that higher selves are only going to show up in people who are um, of a certain level of wealth and a certain level of fame, that a higher self wants to show up in someone who has a lot of ability to procure certain things or have certain experiences, and also that the presence of the higher self means that they're going to like gain a certain amount of wealth and have certain types of experiences, and that's simply not true. um, that's really not how it works, and it's not about getting the most reach to where you can teach the most people to open up themselves and we all have expanded consciousness as fast as possible. This is not about finding the most efficient route to expanded consciousness for the entire world. I simply feel a a need, and I feel there is value in teaching others how to access the part of themselves that is the kind of thing that I'm doing here. Um, I think that a lot of people's subconsciouses and a lot of people's higher selves are trying to teach them things, are trying to reach them, are trying to come through, and it's really hard right now. It's really hard because we live in a society. Did you know that we live in a society? Well, we live in a society. Just one moment. We live in a society, and because we live in a society, it can be difficult to be your spiritually attuned self that can give you guidance from beyond your timelines and beyond your dimension. It's a bit hard to tune in when there are so many things going on that are very important to pay attention to all at once. Those are the types of things that usually distract us from tuning into our higher selves. It is a shame because there is a lot to be learned about everything from tuning into this part of yourself. So, finding a way to help calm yourself down pretty regularly and pretty guaranteed is essential to doing this work on either a day-to-day basis or on a at-will basis. Basically, you're going to have to be able to do this at will. Then you're going to have to practice this a lot so you know how to get yourself to do it at will, and it's going to be different for everyone. uh, the thing is, a lot of this teaching used to be very standardized, and a lot of the teachings were saying things like, if you want to do this, then these are the steps you will go through, and this is the process that you'll experience, and everyone goes through it pretty much like this. And the reason why they said those things is because there was a time before when almost everybody was going through a lot of the same standardized things, who that in the past everybody in the world was going through standardized rituals, and so that's why in the past everybody else knew how to do this stuff, and now that the rituals have been forgotten, that's what's the matter. It's like, no, actually, not everyone got taught this stuff in the past. It usually got uh sequestered to rich families or prestigious bloodlines and like priesthoods. Sometimes it would get kept to like certain cults or whatever, but basically this is a highly gate kept skill, and it being talked about being in use in a macro way with everybody publicly being able to access the ability to channel their higher self. The idea of that even being possible, the assumption that only the gentry classes and the aristocrats were actually able to do, they could afford to be able to do that sort of thing. The thing is, you don't need that, But the other assumption was that if you don't have that, then you need years and years of training from some qualified monk who has been living on a mountain for 50 years. And there's not a lot of those. So again, it's probably going to come down to wealth. You're going to have to access one of those people, and you're going to have to convince them that you're worth teaching, or at least convince them that it's worth their time to teach you. So it it really sucks, but most of the access to these abilities, the actual standardized, taught, lesson based, this is how you do it because we know this is how you do it type of teaching on how to do channeling of your higher self and how to do this kind of work. It has only been accessible to those who could afford it or those who were born into families and lineages that already did it. So basically, luck, pure luck, and small chance luck at that. And that's a real shame because I think that everybody deserves to be able to do this. Now, what does this allow you to do? What does this make you able to do? What can I do because I am Felix's higher self? There's a lot of knowledge I have access to. And if I don't have access to the knowledge, I usually have the ability to find the knowledge in the physical world very fast. I have a knack for finding books, magazines, periodicals, articles, videos, any kind of media that has the information that Felix is looking for or that I'm looking for. And I have a tendency to find or see that information right whenever it's needed, which is very convenient because it means that whenever I do go looking, I often don't end up looking for long. So, information gathering is one of the abilities that you typically gain whenever you're working with the higher self, as it were. There are healing abilities that I'll briefly describe. It's basically like Reiki. Um, but I want to describe it in case you're not familiar with Reiki. And also, there's different types of Reiki, and Reiki does different things. So I should be a little bit more specific. It's basically a type of energy healing. You can start to sense where people have problems in their bodies or in their psyche, and you can manipulate your sense of matter, basically, and your sense of energy and matter to basically direct the flow of healing to help facilitate healing. I don't know how best to describe it because this is one of those places where whenever you consult somebody for Reiki, you are consulting somebody for something that's medical. Like this is supposed to affect your metabolism. It's supposed to help you heal from injuries. Um, when people say psychic surgery, that's still a type of surgery. And I've had it. It's worked. It's been helpful. But you feel pretty drained afterward because you really did go through something that actually your cells and your metabolic system really do have to recover from and recharge from. So that's an ability I have. I don't typically use it a lot. It is a lot for me to do right now, and there's only so much of me. So some people are more sort of attuned to different abilities than others. If I don't get the information itself found, then typically information just sort of shows up for me right when I need it. Um, and like pretty much reality acts like a room of requirement for me. Like I said, reality works like a room of requirement for me. If I need something, it's typically pretty nearby. So I find these abilities useful. I find them helpful. It can be overwhelming if you're not used to it. And I just want to reiterate, if you have like, reality kind of confirming something that you just said, like for instance, you have a thought that you think might be a good direction to go in, and then whatever word was at the end of your thought, you hear that same word on the radio in a song lyric, and it just so happens to randomly play a conversation nearby, say the word as well right after that. That is a synchronicity, and that's reality basically kind of showing to you like, hey, this is loaded into the memory. This is the focus right now. This just so you know, whatever it is that you're activated on, reality is activated on it too. And all it really is confirmation. It's just confirmation that, yep, that's the topic. You switched the topic of the thread to that. There's no expectation that you're supposed to do anything in response or that you're supposed to act a different way after a synchronicity happens. It's really about just like saying, oh, okay, well, this happens during meditation, making a note of it. All right. And now I continue to meditate. One of the reasons why meditation is considered so essential for doing things like channeling or spirit work, even though it's not actually essential and you can do channeling and spirit work without meditation, is because meditation teaches you to handle distractions. One of the jobs that you're supposed to do during meditation is there's like, sorry, I kind of fell out of it. Wow, I like really just sort of, like I said, that medication. I'm calling meditation or medication. Haha. So, here, let me do something. Here's some ills. Pardon me, but that's part of how I get by. It's legal in my state. I'm in Oregon. Um, One of the reasons meditation is so useful is because it teaches you to be distracted and get undistracted. I just now dealt with distraction. My mind lost focus on what it is that I was talking about, and then I had to deal with the fact that I had lost focus. The best way to deal with the fact that you lost focus is to acknowledge, hey, I lost focus. In fact, here's why I lost focus, and now I'm aware of the fact of why I lost focus. And by the way, that process of identifying why I lost focus, it's actually more of a process of forgiving myself for losing focus. One of the things that you should do if you're in meditation and you lose focus is just forgive yourself for losing focus, because all you're supposed to do is just get back in focus again. And all meditation is just sitting with yourself, trying to focus on something, and when you lose focus, noticing that you lost focus, and then reorienting your focus again. And building the tool set to be able to do that, because all those things I described, those aren't actually the actions that you go through. To refocus your attention on something away from something that distracts you, sometimes you have to do several things to be able to refocus that attention. You might have to take the thought that is just distracting you and imagine a box and the thought in the box and close the box and lock the box. And then you send the box to Fiji, and then you put the box in a bigger box, and you put the box in a bigger box, and you send that box over to somewhere else, and then like it's mailed to you and you smash it with a hammer. You get me? Like you have to sometimes do some things with distractions. You have to maybe not follow the distraction. It's like, oh, there's a distraction. I can't just leave the distraction in the room. It's going to keep distracting me. I have to attend to it. I have to do something with it. So you put the distraction away. Once you put the distraction away, you return to your task. And meditation is really just about doing that over and over and over and over again in so many different ways, because it's so hard to gain the state of meditational awareness and keep like that without reverting to the awareness that you're trying to reach that state of awareness. It's so hard to simply just be without being someone who's focused on being. So it's interesting because a lot of what we do as mystics is thinking about thinking about thinking. We have systems for systems for systems for systems. We have a lot of meta stuff. And so what meditation really does, it's kind of funny, it's like meditation. With meditation, it helps you dial that focus back down to the self and away from the big labyrinth of thought that you built around yourself. It really just helps orient yourself again and remind yourself that there's nothing in particular that you have to be focusing on. And when you're not focusing on anything in particular is whenever you can be attuned with your higher self. And that's why it's so hard to do that in this modern world. There's so many things that we're asked to focus on. I actually had to change my life somewhat to be able to do this, by the way. They talk about how your life has to change for you to do, has to change for you to. It is true to some degree, but it changes in the day and age. It also changes per religious sect that you do. There's a lot of religions that just have requirements of their holy people, and that's a lot of work. So they have to change your life to it. For instance, like some are requiring you not to marry. Some are requiring you to marry in a certain way or reproduce in a certain way. Some of them are not. But for each of those things, you have to accommodate your life. For me, um, I have to be able to have these states where I can maintain a long period of time where I am not distracted, where I am free of distractions, and I am able to apply my own focus to reality and set reality the way that I need it to be. There are so many things that are going on in my body right now that are distracting. And each time one of them happens, there's a part of myself that learned this in meditation. It's like, hey, you that's feeling that weird sensation, I get you. I understand that you're feeling that weird sensation. I can't do anything about it right now. You're going to have to wait, but thank you for being part of the body. You're awesome. You're going to be fine. Basically, just acknowledging that part and then moving on and moving my focus back to talking about this stuff. That's something that I learned in meditation. I've been doing it in the background for pretty much this entire talk because part of the conditions that I have is just like a lot of different like pain sensations. For instance, earlier I had like a lot of headache sensation. Now I have medication treating that, but it also brings with it its own kind of distractions and difficulties. So all of those things I just get to acknowledge and say, now I'm putting my focus back to here. And meditation is just the act of practicing that over and over and over and over by simply just trying to direct your own focus for an extended period of time. That's why you can't really fail at meditation, but you can, I don't want to say do it wrong, but if you pursue meditation in a certain way, you may not actually learn this valuable skill from it. And instead, you may do something else. Meditation is time wasted, though, because I think all time trying to meditate is time well spent. Every single time that you try to meditate, you will learn something about yourself. And I don't think that trying to meditate means that you didn't meditate. It's just that the particular skill of directing your focus is typically learned in the type of meditation where you simply just try to keep your focus on one thing. And when you notice that your focus gone away, you just bring it back. That's it. All you have to do is just bring it back, bring yourself back. And that's what it is that your focus is kind of yourself. So this practice on your focus isn't just good for, like, if you're in a business meeting and you're able to focus on what the boss is saying for longer, then you're going to do better. Like, that's great. That's definitely a good result, but that's not really the point of this. The point is that your focus is basically yourself. Whatever Wherever it is that you direct your focus, that's where you're directing your attention. That's where you're directing yourself. Your sense of self is typically where your focus is. So learning to direct your own focus and put it where you want it to be, and learning to be aware of where your focus is directed to, and to shift it back to where it is that you want it focused on. That is essentially learning to direct your own self and be self-directing. It's a huge kind of self-empowerment. And anytime that you face challenge when it comes to how do I direct my own actions, how do I work with myself, how do I direct myself, anytime that you reach these kinds of problems or these kinds of questions, you're going to already have this work there to draw from. You're not just starting from scratch. If you did it in meditation and it's in the subconscious, you would be surprised how easily it can come up into the conscious when it's necessary and when it's called for and called upon. That's basically like the subconscious does this job of being called upon when it's necessary. It's always there, kind of just holding for when it is that it needs to be doing its time and serving the needs that it serves. That's why you can call upon your subconscious to do certain things, but keep in mind that it may already be busy doing quite a lot of things for you. And so if you do decide to call upon your subconscious for certain things, I really suggest taking some time to speak with your subconscious or find a means of sending messages back and forth with your subconscious. For instance, like type your question into Google search and see like the things that come up, or type it into a YouTube search and see the videos that come up and see if there's some answers kind of embedded in the titles and in the content that really stand out to you that, might seem really unusual otherwise. Just asking the universe for some answers in any way that you can. You can just watch the leaves and the trees blow by and see what shapes they make if you want, but get a feel for it. So I'm starting to lose a bit of cohesion. I think it's starting to reach the end of the lesson here. I really just wanted to try doing this, try focusing on it for really the first time in a while. I know I was doing a lot of planetary consciousness stuff in the beginning of this year around February, and I'd say that this is kind of next level of that, because it's less about what my Mercury is and more like what is the other side of me that processes these symbols, that processes that information, that basically teaches all the lessons. Um, and the experience of doing this has been really fun. It's been a bit tiring, but it's been a while since I, as Linc, have really gone on for a while about any subjects that I'm really interested in. So I thank you for the opportunity to speak about this. Um, and I think I'm gonna leave it there. I'm starting to kind of fade. Um, I really encourage you to like, subscribe, comment, and link to the video to share. Haha. And I, Linc, and Felix, thank you for showing up. I will see you next week at the new class. I don't know what that's going to be on yet, but if I don't come up with a different topic, I'm gonna take on Education of Oversoul 7 and Jane Roberts' material. If not, then you'll see in the thumbnail and the video title what it is different that I have picked. I plan to have this in a playlist. I plan on them being numbered episodes. At some point, I do want to do a podcast, by the way, that will have actual guests and maybe co-hosts and stuff. But that's something that's going to wait until the situation that I am living in is a bit more stable. Right now, there's no hot water in the house. It's kind of a construction contractor disaster. And so it's really difficult to plan things with other people. I'd rather not have to cancel on people a bunch because of circumstances not beyond our control. So until then, I like doing these because days, summoning Sundays works just as well as summoning Saturdays, in my opinion. So I'd say look forward to it, and I'll see you then. Thanks for coming by.